What is the easiest way to be free of the little self? Stop identifying with it. If you can convince yourself this little self is not really me, it will just disappear. But how to do this? The little self is something which only appears to be real. If you understand that it has no real existence, it will disappear, leaving behind it the experience of the real and only self. Understand that it has no real existence, and it will stop troubling you. Consciousness is universal. There is no limitation or little self in it. It is only when we identify with and limit ourselves to the body and the mind that this false self is born. If, through inquiry, you go to the source of this little self, you find that it dissolves into nothingness. But I am very accustomed to feel I am this little self. I cannot break this habit merely by thinking I am not this little self. This little self will only give way to the real self if you meditate constantly. You cannot wish it away with a few stray thoughts. Try to remember the analogy of the rope which looks like a snake in the twilight. If you see the rope as a snake, the real nature of the rope is hidden from you. If you only see the rope, the snake is not there. Not only that, you know that there never was a snake there. When you have that clear and correct perception that the snake never at any time existed, the question of how to kill the snake disappears. Apply this analogy to the little self that you are worrying about. If you can understand that this little self never at any time had any existence outside your imagination, you will not be concerned about ways and means of getting rid of it. It is all very clear, but I feel that I need some help. I am not sure that I can generate this understanding by myself. The desire for assistance is part of your problem. Don't make the mistake of imagining that there is some goal to be reached or attained. If you think like this, you will start looking for methods to practice and people to help you. This just perpetuates the problem you are trying to end. Instead, cultivate the strong awareness. I am the self. I am that. I am Brahman. I am everything. You don't need any methods to get rid of the wrong ideas you have about yourself. All you have to do is stop believing them. The best way to do this is replace them with ideas which more accurately reflect the real state of affairs. If you think and meditate, I am the self, it will do you a lot more good than thinking, I am the little self. How can I get rid of this little self? The self is always attained. It is always realized. It is not something that you have to seek, reach, or discover. Your vasanas, mental habits, and tendencies, and all the wrong ideas you have about yourself are blocking and hiding the experience of the real self. If you don't identify with the wrong ideas, your self-nature will then not be hidden from you. You said that you needed help. If your desire to gain a proper understanding of your real nature is intense enough, help will automatically come. If you want to generate an awareness of your real nature, you will be immeasurably helped by having contact with the jnani. The power and grace which a jnani radiates quietens the mind and automatically eliminates the wrong ideas you have about yourself. You can make progress by having satsang of a realized guru and by constant spiritual practice. The guru cannot do everything for you. If you want to give up the limiting habits of many lifetimes, you must practice constantly. Most people take the appearance of the snake and the rope to be reality. Acting on their misperceptions, they think up many different ways of killing the snake. They can never succeed in getting rid of the snake until they give up the idea that there is a snake there at all. People who want to kill or control the mind have the same problem. They imagine that there is a mind which needs to be controlled and take drastic steps to beat it into submission. If instead they generated the understanding that there is no such thing as mind, all their problems would come to an end. You must generate the conviction, I am the all-pervasive consciousness in which all bodies and minds in the world are appearing and disappearing. I am that consciousness which remains unchanged and unaffected by these appearances and disappearances. Stabilize yourself in that conviction. That is all you need to do. Bhagavan once told a story about a man who wanted to bury his own shadow in a deep pit. He dug the pit and stood in such a position that his shadow was on the bottom of it. The man then tried to bury it by covering it with earth. Each time he threw some soil in the hole, the shadow appeared on top of it. Of course, he never succeeded in burying the shadow, but many people behave like this when they meditate. They take the mind to be real, try to fight and kill it, and always fail. These fights against the mind are all mental activities which strengthen the mind instead of weakening it. If you want to get rid of the mind, all you have to do is understand that it is not me. Cultivate the awareness, I am the immanent consciousness. When that understanding becomes firm, the non-existent mind will not trouble you. I don't think that repeating I am not the mind, I am consciousness will convince me that I am not the mind. It would just be another thought going on within the mind. If I could experience even for a moment what it is like to be without the mind, the conviction would automatically come. I think that 1 second of experiencing consciousness as it really is would be more convincing than several years of mental repetitions. Every time you go to sleep, you have the experience of being without a mind. You cannot deny that you exist while you are asleep, and you cannot deny that your mind is not functioning while you are in a dreamless sleep. This daily experience should convince you that it is possible to continue your existence without a mind. Of course, you do not have the full experience of consciousness while you are asleep, but if you think about what happens during this state, you should come to understand that your existence, the continuity of your being, is in no way dependent on your mind or your identification with it. When the mind reappears every morning, you instantly jump to the conclusion, this is the real me. If you reflect on this proposition for some time, you will see how absurd it is. If what you really are only exists when the mind is present, you have to accept that you didn't exist while you were asleep. No one will accept such an absurd conclusion. If you analyze your alternating states, you will discover that it is your direct experience that you exist whether you are awake or asleep. You will also discover that the mind only becomes active while you are waking or dreaming. From these simple daily experiences, it should be easy to understand that the mind is something that comes and goes. Your existence is not wiped out each time the mind ceases to function. I am not telling you some philosophical theory. I am telling you something that you can validate by direct experience in any 24-hour period of your life. Take these facts, which you can discover by directly experiencing them, and investigate them a little more. When the mind appears every morning, don't jump to the usual conclusion, this is me, these thoughts are mine. Instead, watch these thoughts come and go, without identifying with them in any way. If you can resist the impulse to claim each and every thought as your own, you will come to a startling conclusion. You will discover that you are the consciousness in which the thoughts appear and disappear. You will discover that this thing called mind only exists when thoughts are allowed to run free. Like the snake which appears in the rope, you will discover that the mind is only an illusion which appears through ignorance or misperception. You want some experience which will convince you that what I'm saying is true. You can have that experience if you give up your lifelong habit of inventing an I, which claims all thoughts as mine. Be conscious of yourself as consciousness alone. Watch all the thoughts come and go. Come to the conclusion by direct experience that you are really consciousness itself, not its ephemeral contents. Clouds come and go in the sky, but the appearance and disappearance of the clouds doesn't affect the sky. Your real nature is like the sky, like space. Just remain like this guy and let thoughts come and go. If you cultivate this attitude of indifference towards the mind, gradually you will cease to identify yourself with it. When I began to do sadhana, everything went smoothly at first. There was a lot of peace and happiness, and jnana seemed very near. But nowadays, there's hardly any peace, just mental obstacles and hindrances. Whenever obstacles come on the path, think of them as not me. Cultivate the attitude that the real you is beyond the reach of all troubles and obstacles. There are no obstacles for the self. If you can remember that you always are the self, obstacles will be of no importance. One of the Alvaras, a group of Vaishnavite saints, once remarked that if one is not doing any spiritual practice, one is not aware of any mind problems. He said that it is only when one starts to do meditation that one becomes aware of the different ways that the mind causes us trouble. This is very true, but one should not worry about any of the obstacles or fear them. One should merely regard them as being not me. They can only cause you trouble while you think that they are your problems. The obstructing vasanas, mental habits and tendencies, may look like a large mountain which obstructs your progress. Don't be intimidated by the size. It is not a mountain of rock, it is a mountain of camphor. If you light one corner of it with the flame of discriminative attention, it will all burn to nothing. Stand back from the mountain of problems. Refuse to acknowledge that they are yours, and they will dissolve and disappear before your eyes. Don't be deluded by your thoughts and vasanas. They're always trying to trick you into believing that you are a real person, that the world is real, and that all your problems are real. Don't fight them. Just ignore them. Don't accept delivery of all the wrong ideas that keep coming to you. Establish yourself in the conviction that you are the self and that nothing can stick to you or affect you. Once you have that conviction, you will find that you automatically ignore the habits of the mind. When the rejection of mental activities becomes continuous and automatic, you will begin to have the experience of the self. If you see two strangers quarreling in the distance, you do not give much attention to them because you know that the dispute is none of your business. Treat the contents of your mind in the same way. Instead of filling your mind with thoughts and then organizing fights between them, pay no attention to the mind at all. Rest quietly in the feeling of I am, which is consciousness, and cultivate the attitude that all thoughts, all perceptions, are not me. When you have learned to regard your mind as a distant stranger, you will not pay any attention to all the obstacles it keeps inventing for you. Mental problems feed on the attention that you give them. The more you worry about them, the stronger they become. If you ignore them, they lose their power and finally vanish. I am always thinking and believing that there is only the self, but somehow there is still a feeling that I want or need something more. Who is it that wants? If you can find the answer to that question, there will be no one to want anything. Children are born without egos. As they begin to grow up, how do their egos arise and cover the self? A young child may appear to have no ego, but its ego and all the latent vasanas that go with it are there in seed form. As the child's body grows bigger, the ego also grows bigger. The ego is produced by the power of Maya, illusion, which is one of the shaktis, powers of the self. How does Maya operate? How does it originate? Since nothing exists except the self, how does the self manage to conceal its own nature from itself? The self, which is infinite power and the source of all power, is indivisible. Yet within this indivisible self are 5 shaktis or powers with varying functions, which operate simultaneously. The 5 shaktis are creation, preservation, destruction, veiling, which is the Maya Shakti, and grace. The 5th Shakti, grace, counteracts and removes the 4th Shakti, which is Maya. When Maya is totally inactive, that is, when the identity with the body and the mind have been dropped. There is an awareness of consciousness, of being. When one is established in that state, there is no body, no mind, and no world. These three things are just ideas which are brought into an apparent existence when Maya is present and active. When Maya is active, the sole effective way to dissolve it is the path shown by Bhagavan. One must do self-inquiry and discriminate between what is real and what is unreal. It is the power of Maya which makes us believe in the reality of things which have no reality outside our imagination. If you ask, what are these imaginary things? The answer is, everything that is not the formless self. The self alone is real. Everything else is a figment of our imagination. It is not helpful to inquire why there is Maya and how it operates. If you are in a boat which is leaking, you don't waste time asking whether the hole was made by an Italian, a Frenchman, or an Indian. You just plug the leak. Don't worry about where Maya comes from. Put all your energy into escaping from its effects. If you try to investigate the origin of Maya with your mind, you are doomed to fail because any answer you come up with will be a Maya answer. If you want to understand how Maya operates and originates, you should establish yourself in the self, the one place where you can be free of it, and then watch how it takes you over each time you fail to keep your attention there. You say that Maya is one of the shaktis. What exactly do you mean by Shakti? Shakti is energy or power. It is a name for the dynamic aspect of the self. Shakti and Santi, peace, are two aspects of the same consciousness. If you want to separate them at all, you can say that Santi is the unmanifest aspect of the self, while Shakti is the manifest. But really they are not separate. A flame has two properties, light and heat. The two cannot be separated. Santi and Shakti are like the sea and its waves. Santi, the unmanifest aspect, is the vast unmoving body of water. The waves that appear and move on the surface are Shakti. Santi is motionless, vast, and all-encompassing, whereas waves are active. Bhagavan used to say that after realization, the jivan mukta experiences Santi within and is established permanently in that Santi. In that state of realization, he sees that all activities are caused by Shakti. After realization, one is aware that there are no individual people doing anything. Instead, there is an awareness that all activities are the Shakti of the one self. The jnani, who is fully established in the Santi, is always aware that Shakti is not separate from him. In that awareness, everything is his self, and all actions are his. Alternately, it is equally correct to say that he never does anything. This is one of the paradoxes of the self. The universe is controlled by the one Shakti, sometimes called Parameswara Shakti, the power of the Supreme Lord. This moves and orders all things. Natural laws, such as the laws that keep the planets in their orbits, are all manifestations of this Shakti. You say that everything is the self, even Maya. If this is so, why can't I see the self clearly? Why is it hidden from me? Because you are looking in the wrong direction. You have the idea that the self is something that you see or experience. This is not so. The self is the awareness or the consciousness in which the seeing and the experiencing take place. Even if you don't see the self is still there. Bhagavan sometimes remarked humorously, people just open a newspaper and glance through it. Then they say, I have seen the paper. But really they haven't seen the paper. They have only seen the letters and pictures that are on it. There can be no words or pictures without the paper. But people always forget the paper while they are reading the words. Bhagavan would then use this analogy to show that while people see the names and forms that appear on the screen of consciousness, they ignore the screen itself. With this kind of partial vision, it is easy to come to the conclusion that all forms are unconnected with each other and separate from the person who sees them. If people were to be aware of the consciousness instead of the forms that appear in it, they would realize that all forms are just appearances, which manifest within the one, indivisible consciousness. That consciousness is the self that you are looking for. You can be that consciousness, but you can never see it, because it is not something that is separate from you. You talk a lot about vasanas. Could you please tell me exactly what they are and how they function? Vasanas are habits of the mind. They are the mistaken identifications and the repeated thought patterns that occur again and again. It is the vasanas which cover up the experience of the self. Vasanas arise, get your attention, and pull you outwards towards the world rather than inwards toward the self. This happens so often and so continuously that the mind never gets a chance to rest or to understand its real nature. Cocks like to claw the ground. It is a perpetual habit with them. Even if they are standing on a bare rock, they still try to scratch the ground. Vasanas function in much the same way. They are habits and patterns of thought that appear again and again, even if they are not wanted. Most of our ideas and thoughts are incorrect. When they arise habitually as vasanas, they brainwash us into thinking that they are true. The fundamental vasanas, such as I am the body or I am the mind, have appeared in us so many times that we automatically accept that they are true. Even our desire to transcend our vasanas is a vasana. When we think, I must meditate or I must make an effort, we are just organizing a fight between two different vasanas. You can only escape the habits of the mind by abiding in consciousness as consciousness. Be who you are. Be as you are. Just be still. Ignore all the vasanas that rise in the mind and instead fix your attention in the self. Bhagavan often told devotees to be still. Did he mean be mentally still? Bhagavan's famous instruction, Summa Iru, be still, is often misunderstood. It does not mean that you should be physically still. It means that you should always abide in the self. If there is too much physical stillness, tamo guna, a state of mental torpor, arises and predominates. In that state you will feel very sleepy and mentally dull. Rajo guna, a state of excessive mental activity, on the other hand, produces emotions and a mind which is restless. In sattva guna, a state of mental quietness and clarity, there is stillness and harmony. If mental activity is necessary while one is in sattva guna, it takes place. For the rest of the time there is stillness. When tamo guna and rajo guna predominate, the self cannot be felt. If sattva guna predominates, one experiences peace, bliss, clarity, and an absence of wandering thoughts. That is the stillness that Bhagavan was prescribing. Bhagavan, in talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, speaks of bhoga vasanas, vasanas which are for enjoyment, and bandha vasanas, vasanas which produce bondage. He says that for the jnani there are bhoga vasanas but no bandha vasanas. Would Swami please clarify the difference? Nothing can cause bondage for the jnani because his mind is dead. In the absence of a mind, he knows himself only as consciousness. Because the mind is dead, he is no longer able to identify himself with the body. But even though he knows that he is not the body, it is a fact that the body is still alive. That body will continue to live, and the jnani will continue to be aware of it until its own karma is exhausted. Because the jnani is still aware of the body, he will also be aware of the thoughts and vasanas that arise in that body. None of these vasanas has the power to cause bondage to him, because he never identifies with them. But they do have the power to make the body behave in certain ways. The body of the jnani enjoys and experiences these vasanas, although the jnani himself is not affected by them. That is why it is sometimes said that for the jnani, there are bhoga vasanas but no bandha vasanas. The bhoga vasanas differ from jnani to jnani. Some jnanis may accumulate wealth. Some may sit in silence. Some may study the shastras, scriptures, while others may remain illiterate. Some may get married and raise families, but others may become celibate monks. It is the bhoga, vasanas, which determine the kind of lifestyle a jnani will lead. The jnani is aware of the consequences of all these vasanas without ever identifying with them. Because of this, he never falls back into samsara again. The vasanas arise because of the habits and practices of previous lifetimes. That is why they differ from jnani to jnani. When vasanas arise in ordinary people, who will identify with the body and the mind, they cause likes and dislikes. Some vasanas are embraced wholeheartedly, while others are rejected as being undesirable. These likes and dislikes generate desires and fears, which in turn produce more karma. While you are still making judgments about what is good and what is bad, you are identifying with the mind and making new karma for yourself. When new karma has been created like this, it means that you have to take another birth to enjoy it. The jnani's body carries out all the acts which are destined for it, but because the jnani makes no judgment about what is good or bad, and because he has no likes and dislikes, he is not creating any new karma for himself. Because he knows that he is not the body, he can witness all its activities without getting involved in them in any way. There will be no rebirth for the jnani because once the mind has been destroyed, there is no possibility of any new karma being created. So whatever happens to us in life only happens because of our past likes and dislikes? Yes. How can one learn not to react when vasanas arise in the mind? Is there anything special that we should be looking out for? You must learn to recognize them when they arise. That is the only way. If you can catch them early enough and frequently enough, they will not cause you much trouble. If you want to pay attention to a special area of danger, watch how the five senses operate. It is the nature of the mind to seek stimulation through the five senses. The mind catches hold of sense impressions and processes them in such a way that they produce long chains of uncontrolled thoughts. Learn to watch how your senses behave. Learn to watch how the mind reacts to sense impressions. If you can stop the mind from reacting to sense impressions, you can eliminate a large number of your vasanas. In order to have realized the self, jnanis must have done a lot of punyas and tapas in their previous lives. If jnanis experience the fruits of their previous punyas in their last life, they all ought to have been very enjoyable last lives. This does not appear to be the case. Many of them get very sick. They often have to put up with a lot of body problems. There are several reasons for this. Sometimes self-realization makes the body very weak. Bhagavan's body used to shake a lot. When he was asked about this, he would sometimes say, "If an elephant enters a weak hut, what will happen to the hut?" The elephant was self-realization, and the weak hut was his body. Some jnanis take on the karma of some of their disciples and experience it themselves in the form of sickness. In such cases, the sickness cannot be attributed to anything that happened in the jnani's previous lives. Most jnanis have got rid of most of their karma, both good and bad, before they even start on their last life. They have all done tapas in their previous lives. By the time their last life starts, they often have very little karma left. Only a few, like Vidyaranya, Swami, have a lot of punyas left to enjoy. Vidyaranya, Swami, lived several centuries ago. In one lifetime, when he was very poor and hungry, one of his gurus initiated him and told him to do upasana, meditation on the goddess of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. He did that upasana for years, hoping to get rich, but no wealth came to him in that lifetime. In one of his subsequent births, he received initiation from a jnani, did a lot of meditation, and finally realized the self. After realization, he was established in a state of total desirelessness. It was only after his realization that his previous upasana on Lakshmi started to bear fruit. Some time later, after his realization, gold started to fall from the sky into the city where he was living. Vidyaranya Swami realized that this was happening because of his previous meditations. But because he no longer had any desires, he no longer had any interest in accumulating money or gold. He told the king that the golden rain was falling on account of his previous tapas. He also made it clear that he didn't want any of the gold for himself. The king announced that the people in the city could keep any gold which had fallen on their own property. He reserved the gold which had fallen on public property for his own use. The king later used his own share of the gold to build new temples and tanks. The king took the gold which had fallen on the streets and made gold bricks out of it. In order to test whether Vidyaranya Swami was really desireless, the king put some of these bricks outside Vidyaranya Swami's house. Then he and his wife secretly watched to see what he would do with them. Vidyaranya Swami eventually came out of the house, saw the bricks, and squatted on them while he defecated. Because he no longer had any interest in money, that was the only useful thing he could do with them. People are still using gold bricks to make toilets even today. The toilet seat in the private plane of the Shah of Iran was made out of solid gold. The Shah left his plane behind when he had to flee the country. When the people from the new government inspected the plane, they found this gold seat. Visitors were always trying to make Bhagavan use luxurious things, but he never had any desire for them. One lady once brought a velvet blanket for him to sit on, but he refused to accept it. The woman started to plead with Bhagavan, "Please, Bhagavan, take my blanket and sit on it." No one could make her keep quiet. And pleading, Bhagavan accepted the gift just to keep her quiet. He sat on the blanket for about half an hour, and then sent it to Jinnaswami to store. He never used it again. Someone else brought him some sandals made out of solid silver and a silver banana leaf for him to eat off. Bhagavan used the leaf for one meal, just to please the devotee. Then he gave both the leaf and the sandals to the temple. He never even bothered to try the sandals on. The ashram had a room which contained all the presents which people had given to Bhagavan. Bhagavan never used any of them. I was told that shortly after Bhagavan died, Jinnaswami gave nearly all of these presents away to devotees. When Bhagavan was asked by an advocate in the Purumal Swami case, "Do you have any desire for money?" Bhagavan answered, "I neither like it nor dislike it." Bhagavan never liked or disliked anything. If we have likes or dislikes, if we hate or love someone or something, some bondage will arise in the mind. Jnanis never like or dislike anything. That is why they are free of all bondage. How am I to know if I'm making any progress in my meditation? Those who meditate a lot often develop a subtle form of ego. They become pleased with the idea that they are making some progress. They become pleased with the states of peace and bliss that they enjoy. They become pleased that they have learned to exercise some control over their wayward minds, or they may derive some satisfaction from the fact that they have found a good guru or a good method of meditation. All these feelings are ego feelings. When ego feelings are present, awareness of the self is absent. The thought "I am meditating" is an ego thought. If real meditation is taking place, this thought cannot arise. Don't worry about whether you are making progress or not. Just keep your attention on the self 24 hours a day. Meditation is not something that should be done in a particular position at a particular time. It is an awareness and an attitude that must persist throughout the day. To be effective, meditation must be continuous. If you want to water a field, you dig a channel to the field and send water continuously along it for a lengthy period of time. If you send water for only 10 seconds and then stop, the water sinks into the ground even before it reaches the field. You will not be able to reach the self and stand there without a prolonged, continuous effort. Each time you give up trying or get distracted, some of your previous effort goes to waste. Continuous inhalation and exhalation are necessary for the continuance of life. Continuous meditation is necessary for all those who want to stay in the self. you divide your life up into different activities. I am eating, I am meditating, I am working, etc. If you have ideas like these, you are still identifying with the body. Get rid of all these ideas and replace them with the single thought, I am the self. Hold on to that idea and don't let go. Don't give these I am the body ideas any attention. I must eat now, I will go to sleep now, I will have a bath now. All thoughts like these are I am the body thoughts. Learn to recognize them when they arise and learn to ignore them or deny them. Stay firmly in the self and don't allow the mind to identify with anything that the body does. What is the correct way to pursue self-inquiry? Bhagavan has said, when thoughts arise, stop them from developing by inquiring, to whom is this thought coming? As soon as the thought appears, what does it matter if many thoughts keep coming up? Inquire into their origin and find out who has the thoughts, and sooner or later the flow of thoughts will stop. This is how self-inquiry should be practiced. When Bhagavan spoke like this, he sometimes used the analogy of a besieged fort. If one systematically closes off all the entrances to such a fort, and then picks off the occupants one by one, as they try to come out, sooner or later the fort will be empty. Bhagavan said that we should apply these same tactics to the mind. How to go about doing this? Seal off the entrances and exits to the mind by not reacting to rising thoughts or sense impressions. Don't let new ideas, judgments, likes, dislikes, etc. enter the mind, and don't let rising thoughts flourish and escape your attention. When you have sealed off the mind in this way, challenge each emerging thought as it appears by asking, where have you come from? Or who is the person who is having this thought? If you can do this continuously with full attention, new thoughts will appear momentarily and then disappear. If you can maintain the siege for long enough, a time will come when no more thoughts arise. Or if they do, they will only be fleeting, undistracting images on the periphery of consciousness. In that thought-free state, you will begin to experience yourself as consciousness, not as mind or body. However, if you relax your vigilance even for a few seconds and allow new thoughts to escape and develop unchallenged, the siege will be lifted and the mind will regain some or all of its former strength. In a real fort, the occupants need a continuous supply of food and water to hold out during a siege. When the supplies run out, the occupants must surrender or die. In the fort of the mind, the occupants, which are thoughts, need a thinker to pay attention to them and indulge in them. If the thinker withholds his attention from rising thoughts or challenges them before they have a chance to develop, the thoughts will all die of starvation. You challenge them by repeatedly asking yourself, who am I? Who is the person who is having these thoughts? If the challenge is to be effective, you must make it before the rising thought has had a chance to develop into a stream of thoughts. Mind is only a collection of thoughts and the thinker who thinks them. The thinker is the I thought, the primal thought which rises from the self before all others, which identifies with all other thoughts and says, I am this body. When you have eradicated all thoughts except for the thinker himself, by ceaseless inquiry or by refusing to give them any attention, the I thought sinks into the heart and surrenders, leaving behind it only an awareness of consciousness. This surrender will only take place when the I thought has ceased to identify with rising thoughts. While there are stray thoughts which attract or evade your attention, the I thought will always be directing its attention outwards rather than inwards. The purpose of self-inquiry is to make the I thought move inwards towards the self. This will happen automatically as soon as you cease to be interested in any of your rising thoughts.